Raylan pressed himself against the cold metal wall of the waste duct, his breathing shallow and controlled. Through the grate below, he watched Boots pass by, station security making their rounds. His stomach cramped with hunger, a familiar companion after 3 months of hiding aboard Haven Station. The Quen had once been proud traders, but when the mining corporations stripped their homeworld bare, his people scattered across the galaxy like ash in the wind. Nobody wanted refugees. Every species had their reasons. Economic burden, security risk, cultural incompatibility. The words changed, but the meaning stayed the same. Unwanted, disposable, forgotten. The Boots moved away. Raylan counted to 30 before dropping from the duct into the maintenance corridor. His webbed fingers worked quickly at the supply closet lock, a trick learned from another Quen who had died last winter. The door clicked open. Inside, shelves held ration packs and cleaning supplies. He grabbed 2 packs, enough for himself and old Tiva who could barely walk anymore. "Those aren't yours." Raylan spun around, his heart hammering. A human stood in the doorway, wearing coveralls marked with grease stains. Dark hair, brown skin, young but with tired eyes that suggested he had seen difficult times. The human held a toolbox in one hand. "Please," Raylan whispered in broken standard. "I return, I work, please no security." The human tilted his head, studying Raylan for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He sat down on the floor, right there in the corridor, and opened his toolbox. Inside were actual ration packs, the good kind that humans ate. "You hungry?" the human asked. Raylan hesitated. Traps came in many forms. "Name's Danny," the human continued, unwrapping a ration pack. "Danny Walsh. I work maintenance down here. Been seeing signs someone was living in the ducts. Figured they'd come for supplies eventually." He gestured to the floor beside him. "Sit, eat, then we talk." Slowly, Raylan sank down, keeping distance between them. Danny slid a ration pack across the floor. Real protein, vegetables, grains. Raylan's hands shook as he opened it. "I grew up in Detroit," Danny said, eating his own meal. "After the water wars, the city was mostly ruins. We scrounged for food, hid from gangs, did what we needed to survive. I was maybe 12 when the relief workers finally came. I remember being so scared they'd send us away." Raylan ate slowly, trying not to seem desperate even though he was. "How many of you are down here?" Danny asked. 15, maybe 20. The food was making Raylan's head clearer. "We hide, we take little, we no want trouble." "You got skills, training." "I fix things. Atmospheric systems, water recyclers. Was apprentice engineer before," Raylan trailed off. "Before your world got gutted by mining corporations who didn't care what they left behind." Danny's voice carried an edge. "Yeah, we've heard the stories. Administrator Hayes, she runs this station. She's been arguing with the Galactic Council for months about you folks." "They want us gone," Raylan said quietly. "They want you processed, sent to camps where you disappear into bureaucracy and never get out." Danny finished his ration and stood up. "Hayes has a different idea. She thinks Haven Station can be exactly what its name says, a haven. Humans do this, help refugees. Some of us do. Some of us remember what it's like to be the ones nobody wants." Danny extended his hand. "Come on, let's go talk to Hayes, for real this time. No hiding, no running. You've got skills we need and we've got food and shelter you need. Seems like we should work something out." Raylan stared at the offered hand. Every instinct screamed trap. But those same instincts had kept him alive in the ducts, cold and starving, for 3 months. Maybe it was time to try something different. He took Danny's hand. 2 hours later, Raylan sat in Administrator Hayes' office with the other refugees who had been hiding throughout the station. Brex, the Korthan warrior who had lost his fighting arm and his honor with it. Nissa with her 4 younglings, all wide-eyed and thin. Old Jerem, who used to teach at a prestigious university before speaking against his government. Others too, each with their story of how they ended up forgotten. Hayes was a tall woman with gray-streaked hair and sharp eyes. She looked at each refugee like they mattered. "The Galactic Refugee Commission arrived yesterday," she said. "Inspector Toval wants to implement standard protocols, biometric tracking, restricted movement, eventual deportation to processing centers." She paused. I told him no. Shocked silence filled the room. "You understand what that means for you?" Hayes continued. "It means economic sanctions against Haven Station, trade restrictions, possible isolation. The Council doesn't like being told no." "Why you do this?" Raylan asked. "You not know us." "Because it's right," Hayes said simply. "And because I've read enough history to know that every great civilization eventually faces a choice. Do we help those who need it, or do we look away and pretend it's not our problem?" She stood up. "I'm choosing to help. Anyone who doesn't like it can file a complaint." Brex shifted in his seat, his prosthetic arm creaking. "Most species would have surrendered us already." "We're not most species," Hayes replied. "Danny, show them the expansion plans. We're building proper living quarters, not hiding places. Nissa, your younglings will start school next week with the human children. Brex, I need someone heading security who understands both combat and compassion. Jerem, we're setting up a teaching program. Your expertise is valuable." "And me?" Raylan asked. "You're going to help Danny with maintenance. We'll train you properly, get you certified, then you'll train others." Hayes smiled. "Welcome to Haven Station. No more hiding, no more being forgotten." That night, Raylan lay in an actual bed in actual quarters with his name on the door. Through the viewport, stars wheeled past, same as always. But something felt different. For the first time since his world died, Raylan felt something he had forgotten existed. Hope. 3 months had changed everything. Raylan wiped sweat from his brow as he calibrated the atmospheric sensor, his fingers moving with practiced confidence. The new expansion module hummed with activity around him, workers from 6 different species installing equipment and running cables. "How's it looking?" Danny asked, floating down from the ceiling where he had been installing ventilation ducts. "Good, humidity controls are responding properly now." Raylan adjusted the final setting. "Nissa's section will be comfortable for the younglings." That was the human approach Raylan had learned. Instead of forcing everyone to adapt to standard environment settings, they modified the station itself. Pirith needed higher humidity. Corthan required stronger gravity. Valnese preferred quieter spaces for study. The humans simply built different sections for different needs. "Train, don't gatekeep," Danny had explained once. "If someone wants to learn, teach them. Knowledge isn't valuable because it's rare, it's valuable because it spreads." Raylan now held official certifications in atmospheric systems, electrical repair, and basic structural engineering. The humans had taught him everything, shared their technical manuals freely, answered every question without impatience. It felt strange. Most species hoarded expertise, made others pay for training, protected their advantages. Across the module, Brex supervised a security drill with the new team. His prosthetic arm moved smoothly, built by Amy Rodriguez from Spare Parts and Clever Design. It was not fancy medical technology, just functional engineering that let him work again. Brex was teaching combat techniques he had learned over decades, showing others how to protect without killing. "Does it feel different?" Raylan had asked him once, "not being a warrior anymore?" "I am still a warrior," Brex had replied, flexing the prosthetic fingers. "I just learned there are more ways to fight than I was taught. Protecting people is more honorable than destroying enemies." The comm system crackled. "All hands, we have incoming ships, multiple contacts." Raylan and Danny exchanged glances before heading to the observation deck. Outside the viewport, 3 vessels approached. 2 were clearly refugee transports, overloaded and barely functional. The third was larger, unmarked, its hull scarred from hard use. Administrator Hayes stood at the window, Lieutenant Ben Foster beside her. The lieutenant had arrived last month with a small fleet of converted freighters, surplus vessels transformed into temporary housing, more humans who believed in what Haven Station represented. The refugee ships are Silver, Foster reported. Reading his scanner. Insectoid species. Records show they were hired for radiation mining by corporate contractors, then abandoned when the exposure made them liability. Medical teams ready? Hayes asked. Dr. Moore is standing by. We've treated radiation exposure before. The third ship docked first. Its airlock opened, and a woman emerged with a crew of mixed species behind her. She wore practical coveralls and a confident smile. Tess Wright, she introduced herself to Hayes. Independent operator. Heard about what you're doing here and figured you could use supplies. She gestured to her crew. We're not government, not military, just people who think refusing to help is the same as causing harm. Her ship was loaded with medical equipment, food synthesizers, and fabrication tools. Everything Haven Station needed and could barely afford under the economic sanctions. Why? Hayes asked simply. Because governments move slow and people don't, Tess replied. Because I spent 10 years watching corporations exploit workers and then discard them when they got sick or injured. Because someone has to give a damn. She looked around the station. You're doing something that matters. We want to be part of it. The Silver refugees were in worse shape than expected. Their exoskeletons showed radiation damage. Their movements were slow and pained. Dr. Moore's medical team worked through the night, treating symptoms humans recognized from their own nuclear age. Radioactive iodine treatments, chelation therapy, cellular repair protocols that Earth had developed centuries ago. Pip, Nissa's eldest youngling, assisted Dr. Moore with surprising skill. The young Pirith had shown remarkable aptitude for medicine, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. Now barely 8 months into his education, Pip was already helping save lives. Your species had nuclear weapons, one of the Silver workers asked Raylan during a break. Humans did, Raylan corrected. I am Quen. But yes, they split atoms for both power and war, nearly destroyed themselves learning how dangerous radiation could be. And they survived by sharing what they learned, the Silver said quietly. Most species would charge for this medical care, make us work off the debt. Humans charge nothing. They say knowledge of how to heal should never have a price. Old Jerem's University had expanded into 3 modules now. The Valnese scholar taught history, philosophy, and comparative culture to anyone interested. Humans attended his classes eagerly, asking questions, challenging ideas respectfully, genuinely curious about other perspectives. Jerem had told Raylan it was the best teaching experience of his long life. They listen more than they speak, Jerem had observed. Rare quality in any species, especially one so young to the galactic stage. But not everything was smooth. The Galactic Council's economic restrictions were taking their toll. Several major corporations refused trade with Haven Station. Supply shipments were delayed or canceled. The pressure was real and growing. Then came the sabotage. Life support failed in Section 7 without warning. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, trapping workers inside as oxygen levels dropped. Brex's security team responded immediately, evacuating people through maintenance tunnels while engineers worked to restore systems. They found him in the control room. A Centaurian, recently arrived with a refugee group, trembling as he stared at the sabotaged controls. Hayes interviewed him personally, and the story came out between sobs. His family was held in a processing center. Corporate agents had contacted him, made threats, offered money. Sabotage Haven Station or his family would disappear into the system forever. So we rescue them, Hayes said simply. Lieutenant Foster led the extraction team. They infiltrated the processing center during a shift change, moved through corridors with the confidence of people who had done similar operations before, and extracted the Centaurian's family without firing a shot. Precision, planning, and commitment to solving root causes instead of just treating symptoms. The saboteur wept when his family arrived safely at Haven Station. "Why?" he asked Hayes. "I tried to kill your people." "Because the system made you desperate," Hayes replied. "We fight systems, not individuals." Word spread fast. Within weeks, 3 more human colonies announced refugee sanctuary programs. Agricultural settlements, industrial centers, research stations. Each specialized in different support, distributing refugee populations so no single location was overwhelmed. Tess Wright proposed coordinating them into a network. "Make it resilient," she explained. "One sanctuary can be pressured or destroyed. A network of dozens across human space cannot." Raylan worked late that night, training a group of newly arrived Silver in atmospheric maintenance. They learned quickly, their multifaceted eyes perfect for reading complex instrument panels. Soon they would train others, spreading skills and self-sufficiency through the refugee community. Danny found him afterwards. Councils convened an emergency session. They're demanding Hayes appear and defend our policies. "Will she go?" "She's already packing, taking a delegation with her," Danny grinned. "Including you, says it's time the council heard from the people they're trying to process and forget." Raylan felt fear and excitement mixed together. The Galactic Council, the political heart of known space, and Hayes wanted refugees to speak. "We have voices now," Raylan said softly. "Time we use them." The Galactic Council chamber was massive, a testament to the power of bureaucracy. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the amphitheater, their attention focused on the small human delegation standing in the center. Raylan tried to control his breathing, his webbed hands clenched tight. Beside him stood Brex, Nissa, Old Jerem, and Dr. Moore. Hayes stood at the front, facing the council speaker. Speaker Torvin was an Altarian, his silver skin gleaming under the chamber lights. His species had held positions of authority for millennia, and his voice carried the weight of tradition. "Administrator Hayes," Torvin began, "you have been summoned to answer for violations of established refugee protocols. Your sanctuary policies undermine galactic stability and create dangerous precedents. How do you respond?" Hayes did not flinch. "By rejecting your premise, Speaker. The question is not whether we are following your protocols. The question is whether your protocols are worth following." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. "You claim we are creating instability," Hayes continued. "I claim your system creates suffering, and calling that stability does not make it acceptable." She gestured to a display showing images of processing centers, overcrowded facilities, sick refugees behind fencing, despair visible in every frame. Billions displaced, billions dying. Your protocols do not solve problems. They hide them in bureaucracy. A corporate representative stood, his bulk impressive even among varied species. "The Hexian Trade Consortium objects. Unlimited refugee acceptance is economically unsustainable. Haven Station itself struggles with resources, proving our point." "We struggle because you sanction us," Hayes shot back. "And we still manage to feed, house, and educate everyone. Imagine what we could do with cooperation instead of opposition." "You will speak when recognized," Torvin said sharply. Then more calmly, "We will hear from the refugees themselves. Let them testify to conditions." Raylan stepped forward. His legs felt weak, but he thought of Danny sharing lunch in that corridor, of Hayes refusing to surrender them, of all the humans who had seen people instead of problems. "I am Raylan, I am Quinn." His voice was quiet but clear. "My homeworld was destroyed by mining operations, not war, not disaster, business. The corporations took what they wanted and left us with poisoned water and dead soil." He paused, gathering courage. "I fled with my family. We ended up in processing center on Theta Station. We waited for resettlement. We waited for 2 years. My younger sibling got sick. Simple infection, easy to treat, but medicine cost credits we did not have. She died while we waited for approval for care. The chamber was silent now. I escaped, I hid, I stole food to survive. When human found me, I thought I would be sent back to die like my sibling. Raylan looked directly at Torvin. Instead, he shared his meal and offered me work. Humans taught me engineering, gave me purpose, treated me like person, not problem or statistic. He held up his certification pad. I now train others. I contribute to station operations. I have skills and knowledge and hope. You say refugees are burden. I say we are beings who only need chance. Nissa spoke next, her voice carrying the authority of a mother protecting her young. I am Nissa. My species does not abandon eggs. We protect our younglings with our lives. But when our colony ship broke down, the captain called for rescue. The ship that came would only take adults who could pay. They left us because younglings could not work. She activated her own display, showing drawings her children had made. Mixed species playing together. Integrated communities. Hopeful futures. Humans did not save my younglings with charity. They saved them with education. My eldest, Pip, now assists in medical bay. Saves lives at age barely past hatching. You decide here whether this future exists or whether it dies with your protocols. Breck stepped forward and several Corthan delegates shifted uncomfortably. I am Brex. I was warrior of the Corthan fleets. I lost my arm in combat. My people declared me dishonored, useless. They sent me to die because their culture says warriors must be whole or be dead. He raised his prosthetic arm, flexing the mechanical fingers. Humans built this from spare parts, not because they pitied me, because they saw wasted potential. I now teach security techniques to protect civilians. I serve with honor, just not the narrow definition I was taught. His gaze fixed on the Corthan delegation. My people throw away experience and wisdom because of injury. How many warriors have you wasted? How much knowledge lost? Humans taught me strength is not absence of weakness. It is what you do with your wounds. Old Jerem's testimony was different. The Valnese scholar provided historical context, reminding the council of facts they preferred to forget. 3,000 years ago, the Altarians fled ecological collapse, Jerem said, looking at Torvin. The Valnese gave you sanctuary. We taught you star travel. We shared our resources freely. That is why your species survives today. He turned to address the full chamber. Most species here received help at some point in their history. You were refugees once. You were lifted up by others. Humans are simply remembering what you have forgotten. Dr. Moore presented medical data, showing health outcomes before and after sanctuary integration. The numbers were undeniable. Treating problems early prevented expensive crises later. Refugees who received care and education became productive members of society. The current system cost more and produced worse results. This is not charity, Dr. Moore concluded. This is efficiency. You are spending more resources on suffering than you would spend on solutions. The debate that followed was heated. Some delegates questioned everything they had accepted as normal. Others doubled down on tradition and established order. The Hexian representative argued about labor market devaluation, until Hayes exposed how processing centers functioned as sources of exploited workers for corporations. Your system is not broken, Hayes said. It is working exactly as designed for those who profit from it. A young delegate rose, her crystalline features marking her as Trill. Her species had only recently gained council membership after generations as refugees. I must speak, she said. The Trill were refugees for 400 years. We were processed, tracked, restricted, and forgotten. The council eventually granted us membership, but only after we proved ourselves useful. Her voice hardened. Humans are doing what you should have done for us, what you should be doing for everyone. Other delegates from historically marginalized species voiced similar support. The chamber divided along lines nobody had predicted. young versus old, idealistic versus pragmatic, those who remembered being helped versus those who had always held power. Torvin called for order. The Council cannot reach consensus. We table formal sanctions pending further investigation. It was not victory, but it was not defeat either. Months later, the first official Council inspection team arrived at Haven Station. Led by the young Trill delegate, they came genuinely wanting to understand rather than condemn. Raylan was assigned as their guide. As he showed them through the station, explaining how the integrated community functioned, he realized something important. The Council was not monolithic. It was made of individuals who could change their minds when shown better ways. Show them everything, Hayes had told him. They need to see what's possible. And Raylan did exactly that. The distress signal cut through Haven Station's communication channels with desperate urgency. Raylan was helping Danny install new air filtration systems when the alarm sounded, and they both rushed to the command center where Hayes was already coordinating responses. Kepler Station, Lieutenant Foster reported, his face grim. Processing center in the frontier region. Plague outbreak. Unknown pathogen. Infection rate is exponential. The display showed the facility, a massive corporate structure holding thousands of refugees. Hexian Trade Consortium owned it, one of their many processing centers scattered across the galaxy. The same corporation that had fought hardest against Haven Station's sanctuary policies. They are requesting emergency medical assistance, Foster continued. Their own doctors are overwhelmed. Most species are refusing to respond. Of course they are, Dr. Moore said bitterly, studying the medical data. Quarantine protocols mean abandoning the infected until the disease burns itself out. Standard procedure. How many would die? Hayes asked. Tens of thousands, maybe more in those conditions. Silence filled the command center. Everyone understood what Hayes was considering. Going into an active plague zone meant risking exposure to an unknown pathogen. It meant potential death for anyone who volunteered. Standard galactic response was isolation and containment, letting nature take its course. I will not order anyone into this, Hayes said finally, but I am asking for volunteers. Raylan heard himself speak before thinking, I volunteer. Hayes looked at him. Raylan, you understand the risks. You went into danger for us. Now we do the same. Breck stepped forward, his prosthetic hand rising. My security team volunteers. Protecting people is what we trained for. Medical team is going regardless, Dr. Moore said. That's not negotiable. Within the hour, over 300 refugees had volunteered. Silther workers who understood hazardous environments. Quen engineers who could repair failing systems. Valnese who could coordinate complex logistics. Corthan who could maintain order without violence. And humans, of course, always humans leading by example. Pip insisted on joining Dr. Moore's team despite Nissa's protests. The young Pirith had completed accelerated medical training, showing natural talent for diagnosis and treatment. Nissa finally relented, understanding that some lessons could only be learned through action. Tess Wright's volunteer network supplied additional resources within days: medical equipment, protective gear, emergency supplies. The mission became a demonstration of the integrated cooperation Haven Station had built, species working together toward common purpose. The journey to Kepler Station took 3 days. Raylan used the time to study the facility's schematics with Danny, planning how to repair systems that were probably failing under the strain of overcrowding and neglect. Corporate-owned facilities always cut corners, Danny explained. Cheaper to replace equipment than maintain it. Cheaper to let refugees die than invest in their survival. When they arrived, conditions were worse than reported. The processing center was designed for 5,000 inhabitants. 15,000 refugees were crammed inside. Life support systems operated at dangerous capacity. Medical supplies were nearly depleted, and the corporate administrators had fled at the first sign of outbreak, leaving refugees to manage the crisis themselves. Bodies lined the corridors. The sick lay wherever space could be found. The air itself felt heavy with despair and disease. Dr. Moore took immediate command of medical operations, establishing quarantine zones and treatment areas. Pip worked beside her, tireless despite the horror surrounding them. The young Pirith noticed patterns in the infection rates, certain species showing natural resistance while others succumbed rapidly. Dr. Moore, Pip reported after 2 days of observation. The Valnese and Corthan show lower infection rates. Their immune systems are fighting the pathogen more effectively. Old Jerem was called in to research historical medical databases. The scholar worked through archives, searching for similar pathogens in galactic history. After 12 hours of continuous work, he found it. This disease occurred 4 centuries ago, Jerem announced. It devastated several minor species who did not have council representation. Treatment protocols existed, were documented thoroughly, but the knowledge was never widely shared because the affected populations were considered insignificant. The cure had always existed. It simply had been ignored because the victims did not matter to those in power. Dr. Moore and her team adapted the historical treatment to the current pathogen strain. Within days, infected refugees began recovering. The dying started living again. News coverage broadcast across the galaxy showed refugees saving refugees, humans enabling it all, and the corporate system that had caused the crisis through deliberate neglect. Raylan and Danny's engineering teams restored failing life support systems. They found evidence of deferred maintenance, safety systems bypassed to save costs, structural problems ignored for years. The processing center had been a disaster waiting to happen, and corporate management had known and accepted it. As more refugees recovered, they joined the care operations. Former victims became caregivers. The rescued became rescuers. The transformation was visible to anyone watching, and the galaxy was watching. When Hexian executives finally arrived to reclaim control of the facility, they found an organized community that did not need them anymore. Haven Station's team had transformed the processing center into a functional cooperative settlement. Refugees who had been treated as disposable cargo were now operating medical bays, maintaining systems, teaching each other skills, and building something that resembled actual society. "This facility is corporate property," the lead executive declared. "This facility is a health hazard," Hayes countered. "We have documented everything: safety violations, medical neglect, criminal negligence resulting in thousands of preventable deaths." She held up a data pad. "The evidence is already filed with galactic authorities. You can try to reclaim the facility, but you will do it from a prison cell." The refugees refused to return to previous conditions. They had seen what was possible when people cooperated instead of competed, when lives mattered more than profits, when beings were treated as beings instead of resources to exploit. Back in the council chamber, the young Trill delegate introduced comprehensive refugee reform legislation. It was based directly on the human sanctuary model, adapted for broader galactic implementation. Not all species would be required to accept refugees, but those who did would have to meet minimum standards of care and dignity. Processing centers would provide health care, education, work opportunities. Refugees would gain legal advocates and clear pathways to citizenship rather than indefinite detention. The system would cost more upfront but less in the long term, and more importantly, it would align with basic ethical principles. The vote was close, but it passed. Raylan stood with Danny watching the vote count, and when the final tally was announced, he realized they had done something remarkable. They had not just saved lives at Kepler Station. They had changed how the galaxy thought about saving lives. Not bad for a bunch of strays, Danny said. Raylan smiled. We were never strays, we just needed to find home first. Haven Station had outgrown its original design. What started as a frontier way station now sprawled across multiple interconnected modules, housing over 5,000 permanent residents from 43 different species. Raylan walked through the market district, watching Silther merchants trade with Quen craftspeople, while Corthan security officers helped lost Pirith younglings find their parents. The chaos was beautiful. He found Danny in the new training facility, teaching a mixed class of refugees basic electrical engineering. The humans had formalized their train, don't gatekeep philosophy into actual curriculum. Anyone could learn anything, and those who learned were expected to teach others. Knowledge spreading exponentially. Inspector Toval is back, Danny said during a break. Council sent him to evaluate whether we're meeting the new minimum standards. Raylan had to laugh. The same inspector who once demanded they surrender all refugees was now checking whether they treated refugees well enough. The galaxy had changed more in 1 year than in the previous century. But not everyone had changed. The attack came at shift change, when security was transitioning between teams. Explosions rocked 3 different sections simultaneously, carefully timed to cause maximum damage. Raylan was knocked off his feet as alarms screamed through the station. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, dividing Haven into isolated segments. Brex's voice cut through the chaos on the comm system. All security teams respond. We have multiple breaches. Hostile forces boarding through the damaged sections. Raylan helped Danny evacuate civilians from their area, guiding them through maintenance corridors to emergency shelters. Through a viewport, he glimpsed the attacking ships, unmarked vessels with military-grade weapons, not corporate raiders, not random pirates. This was organized and deliberate. The attackers were efficient and brutal. They moved through sections, destroying equipment, sabotaging systems, sending a clear message. Haven Station could be reached, could be hurt, could be destroyed if someone wanted it badly enough. Brex's security teams fought back with non-lethal methods, trying to disable and capture rather than kill. But the attackers had no such restrictions. 3 Corthan officers went down in the first engagement. Dr. Moore's emergency medical teams worked frantically to save them. In the command center, Hayes coordinated defense with Foster while trying to minimize casualties. They are not trying to take the station, she observed. They are trying to prove we cannot protect it. Corporate funding, Foster said grimly. This has Hexion written all over it. They are showing other corporations what happens when refugees get ideas about having rights. The battle raged for 3 hours. Refugees and humans fought side by side, protecting their home. Raylan found himself repairing critical systems under fire, keeping life support running in damaged sections. Danny covered him, using a maintenance tool to disable weapons when attackers got too close. Finally, the attacking forces retreated, their point made. Haven Station was damaged but functional. Casualties were significant but not catastrophic, and the entire galaxy had watched it happen, broadcast on every news network. The response was immediate and divided. Some species condemned the attack, calling for investigation and punishment. Others questioned whether Haven Station's existence justified the instability it created. The debate revealed fundamental disagreements about what mattered more, order or justice. Inspector Toval walked through the damaged sections with Hayes, examining the destruction. His expression was troubled. "This will be used against you," he said quietly. "The Council's conservative faction will argue that sanctuary policies invite violence, that refugees attract attacks, that security concerns were valid all along." "They were not attacking refugees," Hayes replied. "They were attacking the idea that refugees deserve dignity. There is a difference." "Perhaps, but politics rarely cares about such nuances." In the medical bay, Pip worked exhausted beside Dr. Moore, treating injured defenders. The young Pirith had proven remarkably skilled during the crisis, making decisions that saved lives, but the cost was visible in trembling hands and tired eyes. Nyssa found her eldest in a quiet corner, staring at blood-stained medical equipment. "I saved 6 lives today," Pip said softly. "I also watched 2 people die despite everything I tried. I knew the procedures, I did everything right. They still died." "That is part of healing," Nyssa said gently. "Accepting you cannot save everyone does not mean you failed those you could not save. Humans say every life matters, but some lives I could not matter enough. Every life you save matters to that person, to their family, to everyone who loves them." Nyssa embraced her youngling. "You are learning the hardest lesson of all, that caring means risking heartbreak and doing it anyway." The damaged sections took weeks to repair. Corporate interests tried to use the attack as evidence that sanctuary policies were dangerous, but something unexpected happened. Refugee communities across the galaxy began organizing their own defense networks, sharing intelligence, protecting each other, creating mutual aid systems that did not depend on governments or corporations. The attack had intended to show vulnerability. Instead, it demonstrated resilience. Tess-Wright's volunteer network expanded dramatically. More independent operators joined, more human colonies established sanctuaries, more resources flowed to support the growing movement. The galaxy was learning that destroying one sanctuary meant others would rise to replace it. In the council chamber, the young Trill delegate introduced legislation requiring investigation of the attack and protection for refugee sanctuaries. The conservative faction tried to block it, but public pressure was overwhelming. Citizens across hundreds of worlds demanded accountability. Raylan worked long shifts helping rebuild damaged sections. The work was exhausting but purposeful. Each repaired system was a statement. Each restored module was defiance. They were not leaving. They were not backing down. They were home. Late one night, he found Hayes standing in the observation deck, looking at the stars. "Do you ever regret it?" Raylan asked, "starting all this, knowing the danger it brings?" Hayes considered the question carefully. "I regret every casualty, every injury, every moment of fear our people experienced." She turned to face him. "But I do not regret standing up when it mattered. I do not regret treating people like people. And I do not regret building something worth attacking because that means we built something worth defending." She gestured to the station around them. "This is not perfect. We make mistakes. We face challenges. We suffer setbacks. But we keep trying to do better, and that matters more than getting it right the first time." Outside, the first ships of the expanding sanctuary network were visible against the stars. Each light represented a community choosing hope over convenience, justice over order, people over profit. "They tried to stop us with violence," Raylan said. "It did not work." "It never does," Hayes replied. "Because you cannot destroy an idea by attacking the people who believe in it. You just make more believers." The rebuilding continued, and across the galaxy, more sanctuaries opened their doors. 2 years had passed since Raylan first met Danny in that maintenance corridor. Haven Station now anchored a network of 73 sanctuaries across human space and beyond. Old Jerem's University had become prestigious, attracting scholars from across the galaxy. Brex trained security forces for a dozen different species. Nyssa's younglings were growing into confident, multilingual citizens of a truly integrated society. And Raylan was designing a new sanctuary station from scratch. He stood in the engineering bay, reviewing holographic blueprints with Amy Rodriguez, incorporating lessons learned from Haven's rapid expansion. Modular construction for flexibility, redundant systems for resilience, integrated living spaces that celebrated diversity instead of segregating it. "You've come a long way from stealing ration packs," Amy said with a smile. I had good teachers who shared knowledge freely. The comm system activated. All senior staff to command center, priority alert. In the command center, Hayes looked troubled. Long-range sensors showed a massive fleet approaching from the frontier, not military vessels, refugee ships, hundreds of them fleeing from a catastrophic event in the outer colonies. What happened? Foster asked. Corporate war, Hayes said grimly. Two major consortiums fighting over mining rights. They are using inhabited worlds as battlegrounds, millions displaced, billions at risk. The scale was overwhelming. Even with the entire sanctuary network working together, they could not possibly accommodate that many refugees. The system they had built was strong but not infinite. We issue the call, Hayes decided. Full galactic appeal, emergency assistance needed, everyone who can help does. Within hours, responses came from unexpected sources. The young Trill delegate convinced the Galactic Council to mobilize emergency resources. Species that had remained neutral were moving to provide aid. Corporate entities that feared public backlash offered supplies and transport. The attack on Haven Station had backfired spectacularly. Instead of making sanctuaries look vulnerable, it had made opposing them look cruel. But the most surprising response came from the Korthan Empire. Captain Drevak, the officer who once came to execute Brex, now commanded a humanitarian fleet. We have learned from humans that strength includes protection, Drevak announced. The Korthan Empire offers military escort for refugee transports and security for sanctuary stations. Brex stood beside Hayes as the Korthan fleet arrived, his prosthetic arm gleaming. My people are changing, he said quietly, slowly, but changing. The logistics were complex beyond anything attempted before. Coordinating hundreds of ships, processing millions of refugees, distributing them across networks of sanctuaries. It required cooperation between species that had historically competed or fought. It required trust that had never existed before. Raylan worked 20-hour shifts coordinating engineering teams. Danny was beside him as always, solving problems with characteristic human creativity. When standard solutions failed, they invented new ones. When resources ran short, they found alternatives. When systems strained past capacity, they modified and adapted. Pip was now a fully certified doctor, working in one of the largest emergency medical operations in galactic history. The young Pirith had mastered techniques from a dozen different species, combining them into new treatment protocols. Nissa watched her eldest with pride that needed no words. Old Jerem coordinated volunteer networks, matching skills to needs, ensuring knowledge flowed to where it could do the most good. His university became command center for the intellectual response to crisis, scholars and students working together to solve unprecedented challenges. Tess Wright's independent operators formed the backbone of transport operations. They knew routes corporations did not advertise, stations governments did not acknowledge, communities that existed in the spaces between official jurisdiction. They moved people and supplies with efficiency that shocked traditional logistics experts. The crisis revealed something important. The sanctuary network was not just human anymore. It had grown beyond any single species, becoming truly galactic in scope. Refugees who had been saved were now saving others. The helped had become helpers. The rescued had become rescuers. Inspector Toval arrived at Haven Station with a council delegation, observing operations with barely concealed amazement. This should not be possible, he said to Hayes. The coordination required, the resources needed, the cultural barriers that should exist. This should not work. And yet it does, Hayes replied, because we stopped asking whether it was possible and started asking how to make it happen. You have changed the galaxy. We gave the galaxy permission to change itself. Months later, the immediate crisis had passed. Millions of refugees were housed, fed, and beginning new lives. The Sanctuary Network had proven itself capable of responding to disasters on galactic scale. More importantly, it had demonstrated that cooperation was not just idealistic fantasy, but practical necessity. The Galactic Council passed comprehensive reforms. Processing centers were abolished. Refugee rights were codified into galactic law. Species that accepted refugees received support rather than sanctions. The system was far from perfect, but it was better than what had existed before. Raylan stood in the completed sanctuary station he had designed, watching the first residents move into their new homes. Families from species he had never heard of, all starting over, all given chances they would not have had 2 years earlier. Danny found him in the observation deck, thinking deep thoughts. Thinking how strange life is. I was starving in a duct, now I build stations. You were always capable of building stations. You just needed someone to share lunch and teach you the tools. It was more than that. You saw person when everyone else saw problem. That is what you do when you remember being the problem everyone else ignored. Danny looked at the station around them. We built something good here, not perfect but good, and it's spreading. News arrived of another sanctuary opening in the outer rim, then another in the core worlds, then 3 more in sectors that had never accepted refugees before. Each one slightly different, adapted to local conditions, but all sharing the same core principle. People mattered more than convenience. Haven Station celebrated its anniversary with festival that included representatives from hundreds of species. Music, food, stories, laughter. The chaos of different cultures mixing together without trying to erase each other. It was messy and loud and beautiful. Hayes gave a short speech. Characteristically practical. We did not solve everything. We will face new challenges. We will make mistakes, but we proved that trying matters, that caring matters, that refusing to accept suffering as inevitable can change reality. She raised a glass. To everyone who chose hope over fear, to everyone who built instead of destroyed, to everyone who remembered that before we are citizens of nations or members of species, we are beings who share this galaxy. The celebration continued into the night. Raylan walked through crowds of people who had all been strays once, all been forgotten once, all been considered disposable once. Now they were engineers, teachers, doctors, leaders, parents, friends. They were home. He found the duct where Danny had discovered him hiding. It was preserved now, turned into small memorial with a plaque, simple words in multiple languages. Everyone deserves to be found. Raylan touched the plaque, remembering hunger and fear and desperation, remembering the human who sat down and shared his lunch, remembering the moment everything changed. The galaxy had not become perfect, but it had become better, and that was enough to keep trying.